to a place I never...
Yeah, well, you did do it.
What do you...
No one can do... You're doing it! Jesus! Jacob Collier! I'm Hank Green.
I'm Jacob Collier.
And this is Ask Hank Anything. Hello, I'm Hank Green. And I love questions. I love it when people ask me questions. I love answering them. And I also feel like you can learn a lot from people by the questions they choose to ask. And I'm here with Jacob Collier.
Hi.
It's amazing to see you in real life.
Likewise.
You had many great questions. This is maybe gonna be the longest episode that we do because there's so much to get to.
I couldn't resist. There was a lot of
just
pressing things on my mind, I suppose.
And I felt like I knew you better after reading your questions.
Oh, great.
Honestly.
That's fantastic.
So this is Puzzle the Pelican.
Puzzle.
It's
nice to meet you, Puzzle.
And in his
Good beak.
and the Puzzle the Pelican's pouch are your questions.
Right.
You want to pull one for me?
Okay, Puzzle, let's do this. Puzzle number one. How do we feel the wind?
I love this question. How
Yeah.
do we feel the wind?
Yeah, I love it. I love it too, that's why I asked it.
So there's a bunch of different things that you're feeling all at once, it turns out.
Right.
So you've got hairs
Yeah.
on your skin, and there's little receptors at the base of those hairs that can feel when those hairs move. But that doesn't feel like the wind if you just touch them.
Yeah.
There's temperature sensors in your skin, and so they sense that the temperature goes down because the warmer air near your skin is being blown away. But if your skin just cools down, that doesn't feel like the wind either. And there's also like actual touch receptors on your skin that feel the very slight change in pressure, which is amazing that you can feel just the pressure of air blowing across your skin.
Yeah.
But if you just touch skin, that also doesn't feel like the wind. When we feel the wind, it has to be all of those things at once.
A particular combination of
For it to
things.
feel like wind.
Whoa.
I had never thought of that. Also, if you like stick your hand out the window of a car,
Which I do a lot.
then you're like feeling the wind. You're actually like the actual mass of the air,
Yeah.
it having to get out of your way is a physical force.
Is it essentially a change of pressure is what we're feeling at the heart of like, what's going on?
Well, did you just ask me what wind is?
Kind of, yeah, I did.
Because
I suppose I
that,
did,
like,
yeah.
wind is strange.
Yeah.
I am actually fairly frequently asked by the internet, where does the wind come from?
Yeah, it's a good
Which
question.
it is weird. But we are in an ocean of air, and that air has currents, just like water will have currents. But the big current of air isn't like flowing downhill. It's near the earth, the air heats up because the earth is hot. And then as that air heats up, hot air rises. And so that air lifts and cold air comes down to replace it.
So there's a constant.
And when that happens,
motion.
like we don't feel wind as it goes up, but wind going up is actually what creates wind going side to side.
Yeah.
But it is actually, it's molecules hitting your skin.
Right.
So like and they exist. It took us forever to figure this out.
Yeah.
It's been about 250 years since we like confirmed for sure that air is stuff, which is very strange because it's the one thing that you need the most.
Yeah. You can see why it took us so long though, because I mean,
You can't see it.
because
Where is it?
exactly.
It's in here.
yeah.
It's definitely in here with us.
Yeah.
But like when the United States of America was founded, we didn't know that oxygen existed. And now we don't just know that it exists and that we need it. We know like precisely in really deep detail
Crazy.
why we need it.
Amazing. It's wild to think about that time frame. It's not
Yeah.
long, is it?
No.
No.
No, and to have such a big mystery for like 99.99% of human history, if you don't breathe, you die fast.
But what's going on when we breathe?
But why?
Exactly.
Gotta be magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Of course.
Some animating essence in the air has
Yeah.
to get inside of you regularly or else.
Or else.
So that's super cool.
Excellent. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, I thought that was really lovely because sensation is one of the things that's like makes living things living. And I was kind of surprised to find that it isn't just one thing, like no individual bit of that
There's a lot of different things at play.
makes it the feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love it. Is it time for another question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do that. So, okay, Puzzle. How many things is it possible to focus on at once?
Well, I'll tell you, I focused on this question for a long time.
Right.
It's a hard question to answer because it gets into like attention, which gets into like consciousness.
Yes, well, and then it gets gnarly, right?
Yeah. But it seems like for most people, there might be some people who are weird who could actually divide their consciousness a little bit. But for most people, it seems like one.
Really?
And this might, I think particularly might be surprising to you because you can do a lot of things at the same time. And I would like to do an experiment on you.
Oh, okay.
To see how it goes. Can I try to do a little bit of science on you?
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
It's also going to require you to play a song.
It is going to require a song.
Yeah.
I don't know any songs. Cool. Okay, so what's the experiment?
The experiment is that you're going to listen to something while you play music.
Yeah, okay, cool. Is it music I'm listening to, or is it something else?
No, it's me talking to you.
The dulcet tones of Hank.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you stuff.
And am I singing and playing? This is crucial, I suppose, because playing is one thing, but singing is another.
You can do both, or just one. Do you think you could, like if you were singing and playing, do you think you could understand what I was saying to you?
I think
bet you could.
It would be more challenging if I was singing words than if I'm just playing. We can have a whole conversation while I'm playing.
Right.
But if I'm singing words, I suppose that's where it starts to get
We'll see, though.
linguistically divisive.
Yeah, because you got like the two different parts of your brain.
Exactly. Well, so it's up to you, however you want to write.
I'd really like to try it with you singing.
Okay, cool, let's do that.
Okay, here.
Okay, I'll play Little Blue, which is a song of mine. Oh, sorry. We've got this F is 16 cents flat, isn't it?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Little blue, be my shelter, be my cradle, be my womb, be my boat, be my river, be the still sorrow. If I could, I'll go with you. Yeah. Okay.
You understand everything I told you?
I did.
Isn't that wild?
That's very interesting to me. So what's going on there?
I think what's going on is that you have done that so many times that you are able to have your focus be on what I'm telling you, where there's like another part of like, you can also do operations that are not requiring focus.
Yes.
Which you definitely can do when playing guitar, but you can also do that while singing, which is really weird. But if I continue and take your guitar away,
Yeah.
because I'm going to ask you to do something much harder now.
Confiscation.
I'm going to confiscate your guitar, and can you continue to sing your song for me?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to give you this back.
I love this. You've got all the different formats you could ever want.
Yes, it was exciting when I found that as well. Okay, give me the Little Blue.
If I could, I'd go with you to a place I never knew. If I could, ooh, I'd go with
Whoa, I did not expect it to work. Did you understand what I was saying?
you. I probably lost focus on what you were saying a little bit.
Yeah. I can't believe you were able to keep singing, though.
Oh, really?
That's wild.
Well, I've tried my best.
To be to be able, like, it's so funny because like there are parts of your brain that are like one of the reasons why you're able to split focus on certain tasks is because they're actually being done by different parts of your brain.
Yeah.
So playing guitar and singing being done by different parts of your brain, they're talking to each other a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Does that count as one thing or two things?
It's definitely two things.
It is? Right,
Yeah.
interesting.
And like the focus is so interesting to me where it seems like the switching of focus from one thing to another, which you probably experienced a little bit there while you were trying to write and listen at the same time, because those are being done by two, like the same parts of your brain, that your focus had to switch back and forth between what I was saying and remembering what you had for breakfast and also doing the actual manual dexterity of moving a pen around.
Yeah.
Those are a lot of different things at once, but I wanted to do that with you specifically because of the people who I've ever met in my life. Like you're the one who's most likely to be able to move one hand in one direction and your foot in the other.
This whole thing and all of that.
Yeah. Have you ever tried that one? So no one can do this.
So it's like that.
One, yeah. Oh, no,
Yeah.
Oh, you did do it.
Am I doing it?
Ah, no one can do it. You're doing it, Jesus, Jacob Collier. You didn't even know that that's a thing and you could do it.
No, I don't.
At home, try and do this. Try to move your foot in one direction and your hand in the other.
Everyone's doing it in the room. I love it.
It's so hard. It's something only percussionists can do.
But right. Yeah.
Because you have to split that out.
So the guitar playing and the singing is, you're saying that's two different parts of the brain?
The hand and the mouth are controlled by different parts.
The hand and the mouth?
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you mean. But what happens when you go on tour is, at the beginning of the process, you're just trying to remember what to do and when to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a process of being like, okay. And for my tour in particular, it's like 100 musical instruments on stage. So it's like, okay, play bass for 4 bars and then go and play drums and then go and then sing and do the audience. So and then there hits like a terminal velocity of attention where I know what I'm doing,
right.
and then I'm able to essentially just gather more information, like how's that person feeling, and what does the room need, and am I hungry, or and your mind starts to wander. But I've always been interested in the way your attention is designed, because just because I feel like there's a way, there's a point past which it becomes ingrained within you what you're doing. Yeah. So for example, I recently figured out a polyrhythm, which interested me and was a challenge that I always wanted to figure out. And we can talk about this later as well, but you know about polyrhythms, right? The idea of multiple rhythms at once. So I figured out how to do 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the fingers of one hand.
I saw you do this on a video.
And so the thing about this is obviously there's a portion of this task where you sit and you have to figure it out. So what does this sound like? And then it's almost like that becomes ingrained, and you can know what's going on and you learn it as a passage. And my question really is, if there's a point where that gets transferred from like an active lobe or something into something which is more unconscious, that frees up more space to be able to...
We call it muscle memory. It's not stored in your muscles.
Muscle memory, yeah.
It is a thing where your attention can be on one thing while you are still fulfilling a task. So you can think about your day while you're going on a run. You can think about your day while you're knitting. You can knit while running. You can do a Rubik's Cube while singing. Yeah. Like if you have, probably a Rubik's Cube actually does probably require attention, but that the focus, like there is this thing that is a separate, like focus is separate from accomplishing tasks, which is weird. Yeah. So true multitasking is when you're able to focus on one thing while achieving, like accomplishing another task at the same time. Multitasking is not focusing on 2 things at the same time, which seems pretty much impossible, except with some very rare people. So you're essentially saying what happens is that you've got one beam of attention that's kind of, it's like zeros and oneing. Yeah. It a little bit makes me feel like music is special. Like there's something.
In what way?
That like we are set, like our brains are set up to do it. Like for me, and I think for a lot of people, there's sort of like always something rhythmic going on in the back of your brain. Like, do you always have a song in your head?
Yeah, constant current of things.
What's in there right now?
I'll stop it there.
Is it an actual song, or is
no,
it
it's
just
not.
like have?
Normally,
wow.
It's a jumble of little fragments of things I've heard, and my mind just
I have
all day long.
And I have saved the night from the 1990s. And fight the break of dawn come tomorrow.
No, that goes with the thing I was doing.
Okay.
Sing that again.
Save tonight and fight the break of dawn. Yeah, we can't use any of this.
Copyright strike. I feel like my brain, all of our brains are constantly absorbing things, right? Yeah. And then in the background, behind the scenes, there's like sort of constant like alchemy and mining going on. And to me, I think a lot of creativity comes down to the combination of things. Yes. And that's like the heart of the matter for me. So I wonder whether there's an amount of like that groove that was in my head that was, I can probably point to it and say, well, this is a bit like this and this is a bit like this. But my mind was finding a unique recipe for, and I don't know why, but it's
back there doing it.
It's doing its thing.
I love it. Our brains are adorable.
Yeah, they are.
We're out here like trying to make a show, and in the back, but the brain is like, but also he's just grooving out back there, all by himself. He's grooving out by himself. I have no control over it.
Do you hear things that don't exist as songs that you feel like a?
Yeah, like words.
Words, or you say rhythms as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they like usually rhythmic words. Like sometimes it's just a phrase that's repeating itself over.
Example?
It'd be like turning off the light and then walking to the store.
Yeah,
like
okay,
stuff like that.
Banger. Well, let's see what puzzle is it?
Puzzle the Pelican.
See what puzzle has to offer us. Oh, that's a great one. As someone who's just very, very fascinated by the Earth, how it works, how it can be protected. Yeah. Carbon offsets, how do they work? Do they work?
So carbon offset, basically the idea is if I flew to LA, I'm going to fly back home, then that had a certain amount of carbon impact associated with it coming out of the back of that plane. And so if it released, say, a ton of CO2, probably wasn't that much, but whatever, then I could pay to take that carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere somehow. And the best way to do that would be to literally do that. I pay someone to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it for good. That's what the best carbon offset would be. And that would cost like $500, which is too much. Like nobody's gonna pay extra $500 on the top of their plane ticket. Yeah. Maybe somebody would, but like what you end up with is a kind of like a market that's based on, okay, what's the cheapest way to remove CO2 from the atmosphere? But what you also do when you do that is you explore the least useful way,
Yeah.
like the worst way,
Yeah.
the sort of most made up way. So one way I could do it is I could say to somebody else in Missoula, I was like, at the airport, I could be like, hey, you going on this flight? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, well, how about you don't? You stay here, and then I'll give you $100, you stay here, and I'll save that carbon. But I haven't saved anything because that flight's still flying.
Yeah.
And even if like we did that enough that one flight didn't leave Missoula, that's not really what we're talking about. Like preventing the emission is different from removing the emission.
Yeah.
And the way that it turns out is the cheapest way to do this is to basically say, like, let's not cut down a forest.
Yeah.
So somebody who
Yeah.
owns some forest will say, all right, maybe I'm gonna cut down this forest unless you pay me. And then people who are offsetting their carbon will say, okay, well, your forest is worth this much carbon.
Keep your forest.
We'll
yeah.
pay you to not cut down the forest. And that's gonna save the emissions that will come from that change of land use.
Because of the absorbent CO2 within the forest.
And all the stuff in the soil and stuff.
Yeah.
But what often happens is the cheapest ones are the ones that are actually least likely to be cut down in the first place.
Yeah.
Like they have people using them, they're important to their local communities, so it'd be like
yeah.
a big like hubbub to cut it down. The trees aren't very old or good. It's too swampy to get the machinery inside of it. And so you sell super cheap offsets. You say, we're not gonna cut down this forest that you weren't gonna cut down in the first place.
Yeah,
So you just like pay me $15 and I won't cut down this forest.
Easy.
And that's even worse in some ways than not buying the offset because it enables you to keep releasing CO2.
Yeah.
If your company, for example, has like this net zero commitment and they say, oh, we'll just buy a bunch of cheap offsets and then we can emit even more, then that's actually worse.
Yeah.
But there's a level of quality of different carbon offsets. But like the market basically says, oh, I'll buy the cheapest ones. And the cheapest ones are the worst ones.
Of course, as always.
Yeah.
And what about this thing with chalk?
Which thing with chalk?
Well, there's a thing with chalk.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's in the last maybe few years I saw it come. Maybe it's at MIT or something. But
Yeah, I think
someone had this grand old plan to reflect back the.
Oh.
Well, God, what I don't know.
That's separate from what I thought you were talking about.
Oh, really? Am I getting onto something else?
No, I mean, so like surface albedo is what you're talking about. So how white the Earth is.
In terms of reflecting back, but that's different, isn't it? Isn't that UV?
Yeah, but that's not just UV. It's all thermal radiation that's coming into the Earth.
Oh,
so
I
the
see.
big problem with carbon dioxide is that it is transparent to visible light. You can see through it. We're seeing through it right now.
Right.
But it is not transparent to infrared light. And when light from the sun comes and hits us, that's mostly visible light. It's also some infrared. But when it's being re-radiated by the Earth, it's almost all infrared. So we are both, because we're warm, radiating infrared right now. And carbon dioxide, the higher the concentration is, the more opaque the atmosphere actually is to that light, and it gets trapped inside.
Yeah.
But if you had something that was reflecting just the visible light and not as infrared, then that could get through the carbon dioxide and get out. And white light is just a combination of all visible light. And so instead of absorbing and re-radiating, it's just reflecting.
Yeah.
So it's basically like putting a mirror on the surface of the Earth.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of different things that we do around that. Like now it used to be that for whatever reason, roofs were all painted black, but now they're all painted white.
Yeah.
Because it actually saves on air conditioning bills too.
Yeah. Right.
But it there's some negligible impact on the amount of heat in the system if you paint all the roofs white. So that's one way. That's like not about carbon dioxide, but it is about managing the heat. And managing carbon dioxide is about managing the heat. It actually doesn't matter how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. It matters how much heat is in the system.
Right.
And CO2 is just a way that it gets trapped.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you do them badly,
Yeah.
it just sort of sounds like, oh, carbon offsets are bad. But they're not necessarily bad.
It's
they're
more
just
that there's
generally
a
done
continuation
bad.
of the things that are bad.
And we need some system that actually talks about the quality of the offset
Yeah.
instead of just calling them all the same.
Yeah.
Because they're not all the same.
And so for a person who's probably watching this, or a person like me who travels, who lives as a human, who really wants to feel that there are things they can do that can genuinely help.
Yeah.
What are those things? If it's not carbon offsets, what are those?
If you're talking about your personal impact, you can do carbon offsets.
Yeah.
You just have to look into and feel good about how they're actually being done.
How? Yeah.
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 And there's a few different companies where you can look and they actually tell you what work they are doing.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that is about land use that's fine. You know, but if it's like, we promise not to cut down this forest, we're not going to cut down, that's kind of not fine.
Yeah.
But there's lots of stuff that actually is effective carbon removal that you can pay to get done. It's just more expensive than the cheapest options.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
That's cool. Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, Pelly. What's the future of carbon removal?
There's a bunch of different ways to get carbon out of the atmosphere.
Do tell.
So there's sucking it out directly, so like taking the air in this room right now and sucking out CO2. This is the most expensive, kind of best way to do it.
Yeah, what's the sucker there?
It's a big fan, and then it blows it over materials that absorb carbon dioxide, and then you physically take those materials. It's done in a bunch of different ways, but this is one way.
Yeah.
And then you physically take those things that have now absorbed a bunch of carbon dioxide, you take them to a place, and then you heat it up, get the CO2 to release out, and then you store it somehow.
Where do you store it?
Usually underground. So
is that sustainable?
It is probably. So when we take oil out of the ground or gas out of the ground, what's left is big caverns under the ground, and it's trapped. It's like we have a wellhead that is a hole down into where the oil used to be, and you can put the CO2 down in there, pump it down in there, and cap that well.
Interesting.
And it stays down in there.
Yeah,
over
wow.
geological timescales.
But then over the course of time, we're going to probably do less of that, right? Getting oil out of the ground and coal out of the
We
ground.
have plenty of holes, Jacob.
Oh right, okay. So we're not going to. There's no shortage. Of
No,
holes.
okay. That's one of the things they say about Earth. No shortage of holes.
Okay, great. That's reassuring. Yeah, I understand. Well, that seems effective.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it, but it's very
expensive.
expensive. You can also capture the CO2 coming straight off of a power plant, so it's a much higher concentration. That's actually easier to do, but it relies on you continue to burn fossil fuels. And it also sort of gives you an excuse to keep burning fossil fuels.
Yeah, I understand.
But you still have to get it to the place, you have to put it in a pipeline, get it to where you're gonna pump it into the ground, because the coal-fired power plant isn't gonna be by the hole, usually. There's a step that's better than that, where you burn biofuels of some kind. So you might burn like the leftover pieces of corn stalks or wood or whatever, and then you capture that carbon. So that's actually carbon that was captured by the plant from the atmosphere. You burn it, capture the carbon. So you're actually decreasing the amount of carbon instead of just not releasing extra.
I understand that. Yeah.
There's something this is great. It's called enhanced weathering. So the Earth naturally, as like water goes over rocks, it exposes new rocks. And those rocks can react with the carbon dioxide in the air and remove a little bit of CO2. That happens naturally, it happens all the time. And enhanced weathering is when you take rocks and you say, instead of like waiting for them to break down, you just grind them up and then you spread them over a large area of land, and they just sit there and they sort of gobble up CO2.
Is there a particular kind of rock that does that best?
Yeah, there is.
Wow. Yeah.
What is it? Hello, it's Future Hank, who I have to say is not really a rock boy. Like, I don't know that much about geology, so I'm feeling a little bad about this. I started researching this, and for a long time I was confused about the difference between a rock and a mineral, so just know that that's where I'm at going in. The Explain Like I'm 5 version is that like a rock is the cake and the minerals are the ingredients in the cake. So minerals are specific chemical crystals of solid stuff that have specific chemical formulas, and then a rock is an agglomeration of one or multiple minerals of a certain size. Like at a certain point, it gets too small to be a rock. Anyway, there are good rocks for carbon sequestration, but they contain good minerals for carbon sequestration, and those tend to be silicate minerals. Silicates are like a metal bound to a silica ion. So what happens is water, as raindrops, will dissolve CO2 out of the atmosphere and form carbonic acid, and that will weather away these rocks, and the silica will break off of the metal and form basically sand, and the metal will bind with the carbonate from the carbonic acid, and that metal carbonate, like magnesium carbonate or whatever, will last forever and just be a new ion in the soil, and that CO2 will no longer be in the atmosphere. So what you're looking for is rocks that have a lot of silicates, and that's generally basalt-type rocks, so stuff that crystallized out of magma or lava, basically solidified lava. Again, I'm not a geology boy, but there are a bunch of important differences that these rocks can have that are like pros and cons for carbon capture, and they include, one, are they like available nearby? You don't necessarily want to do a bunch of extra mining and transport of those rocks because that's going to have environmental impacts associated with it. That's going to decrease your potential carbon savings from this work. But basalt is really common, and it's often left over in mining operations. So you take the basalt out and then you just put it in big piles when you're taking out diamonds or platinum or nickel or whatever.
whatever. And that's basically a waste product that's sitting in piles that we could grind up and use for enhanced weathering. Number 2 important thing, how quickly does the rock actually break down and absorb CO2? There's a bunch of different rates at which this happens for different mineral combinations. Olivine is, it seems like the fastest one, and so olivine could potentially be a really good enhanced weathering rock, but it has other potential drawbacks, which we'll get to in a second. How hard is the rock matters, because crushing the rock to expose more surface area so that you can capture more CO2, that takes energy. And then last on our list, what minerals are in the rocks? So some minerals have like extra magnesium or potassium, and that might actually make agricultural fields more productive. So in addition to capturing the CO2, you have an added benefit. But other rocks, and this sometimes includes olivine, can have heavy metals in the rocks. And you do not want to spread heavy metals over an agricultural field or a beach. And that's the best I could do as more of a chemistry boy than a geology boy. And now we're going back to the video.
So there's a bunch of options like that. There are other things. There's like certain ways to burn called like biochar as a way of burning wood without releasing the CO2. And then that becomes like a useful supplement for soil. So it becomes actually a useful product that people will buy from you.
Okay, yeah.
Seaweed farming, where they grow a bunch of seaweed, bundle it up, and then sink it to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
Which would work, and actually is one of the cheaper ways that we've looked into, because seaweed freaking grows.
Yeah, right.
And you can create a little, like a fairly inexpensive seaweed farm. There is a concern that when you sink a bunch of seaweed to the bottom of the ocean, it changes the ecosystem of the bottom of the ocean a lot.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of food down there, and you suddenly drop a ton of nutrients into the bottom of the ocean, and you could mess things up.
People get confused.
People,
yeah.
the little, little,
A person.
very wet people.
A wandering wet person with gills and fins. And
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I get, but also, oceans also inherently store carbon, right?
Oceans do store carbon.
So it's like looking after the oceans. as
Yeah,
much as anything else.
something like, and this is a very controversial idea, is to amp up the ocean's ability to absorb carbon at the oceans, the organisms in the ocean, by dumping nutrients into the ocean to allow more
Life.
phytoplankton to exist.
Interesting.
And so you create these artificial blooms of these microorganisms to gobble up a bunch of carbon. There's too many of them for the local ecosystem to eat, so they just fall to the bottom and don't re-enter the carbon cycle. And so that's separate from the actual water absorbing the CO2, like it's a soda.
Yeah.
But that's like super controversial,
I can
because
see why.
it's just like, you do not know what effect you're gonna have on the ecosystem
That's
when you
really
do that.
interferent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People have tested that out and then gotten in trouble for it, because
Yeah.
they did not have permission to do it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wild. We have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I
I just went to the Arctic Circle on a
saw that.
Greenpeace ship. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I learned a lot about the oceans and how they work. And it's just like, even just something as simple as once you leave the border of land, it's a bit lawless.
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard to police what people do out there.
Yeah.
Unless you have these sentries.
That's what
that
this
go
guy
around.
did. He went out and he just dumped a bunch of iron
Yeah,
filings into
right.
the ocean, and people were like, "Can you do that?" And he was like,
Well, who stopped me? Yeah. It's kind of crazy.
"Yeah." Well, we've got another question. I went in deep. I don't know if it's the next one, but we can find out.
Yeah, you know what? Let's find out. What is the physiological difference between falsetto and chest voice?
It is the question I was hoping it was.
Yeah, okay, great.
Oh man, this is really cool. I
I
guess
have no idea.
Really?
No, I have no idea.
I know that it's something physiological happening in my body because I can feel it
Yeah,
physiologically.
yeah.
So it must be something. And I look into it. This is like how your voice works, which is wild. Like this is basically what's happening in your throat when you talk.
So air's coming out from...
Air is coming from your lungs, it's passing through a membrane that is vibrating.
Yeah.
Because like it's two things that are like letting a little bit of air out one at a time. And it's like, and then you're controlling some muscles that determine the pitch of that noise. So it could be, it's hard to control the pitch, it turns out,
you could
of a balloon.
Pinch, can I have a go?
Yeah, you go.
Actually, do you want to blow that up again? Okay. So...
That was 2 notes.
Yeah, so I guess just the tighter it is, the more higher. Yeah, cool.
What note was that?
Yeah. Wait. So it's like kind of a D natural, isn't it?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. And your vocal folds, we call them vocal cords, that's wrong. It's just 2 things.
It's this, isn't it?
And air flops through them.
Yeah.
And when you're in your chest voice, the whole fold is flapping. So like there's basically two kind of components to it. There's this more like strong muscular structure, and then there is a membrane on the outside of it. And in your chest voice, it's the whole thing is flopping back and forth. And when you're going to falsetto, what happens is those more like muscular, strong parts of the vocal folds are stretching out and they're getting stiff and they stop moving, and only the membrane between them is what the air is passing through. So it is actually a totally physiologically different thing. And then there's also when you go into vocal fry, where you go like this. That's also kind of a different phase for the vocal folds. And then when you do whistle tones, when one does.
When one whistle tones.
That's another sort of mechanistically different thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it is actually that there's kind of two components to the folds. And in chest voice, both of them are moving together. And in falsetto, only one of them is moving. I didn't quite get to the bottom of why it definitely feels like one is in your head and one is in your chest, but I have a guess. Do you have a guess?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, it's twofold. One is that the chest is lower in the body than the head, so it's just become a colloquial to describe it as lower.
Yeah.
And the other is that it's about the resonance in the nasal passage. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah. Well, that's my guess, is that in chest voice, actually the wavelengths are more attuned to the resonant structures of the chest, and in higher tones are actually more in tune to the resonant structures in your face.
Yeah.
A bunch of sinus stuff.
I mean, there are so many terms for these kinds of voices. There's chest voice, there's head voice. When I was a boy, like 12, 13, I was doing lots of singing with my treble voice. Then it was often described as head voice, because I would go, and you can feel it like here.
Yeah. You can actually feel like different notes, you can feel them resonate in different parts of your body.
And a lot of the time in vocal technique and training, I haven't done a lot of it, but they talk about where to put the note in your body. You know, put the note more here, and you can feel your nose vibrating. So they call it like the nasal tone. You know, which is different from.
I can like hear your nose moving.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? But because I've always been obsessed with the human voice.
Yeah.
And I've spent many years recording my own voice in innumerable ways on top of itself, and have recently become interested in audiences and conducting the audiences, which is like 5,000 voices. So it's like, what happens when voices add together? And when you add your own voice together, you hear a lot of your own, we call it the formant of the voice, which is like the specific overtone structure that makes your voice yours. That gets really exaggerated. And so I've just tried to find different ways around it. And one of the ways around it is to record, say there's a note in the chord that I think is important, so I'm going to record it, say 4 or 5 or 6 times. You do a mixture of falsetto and chest voice. So, for example, if I do ah, right, or ah, right.
Gotcha.
Wah, 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 that's chest, whereas ah is falsetto. And I used to play a game when I was a kid of going like, ah, ha, ah, ha, ah, ha, ah, ha,
right,
which is just hopping between the two.
Yeah, same note, different.
But you can feel your voice going.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks so much.
I was shocked. Honestly, I was like, well, what's really shocking is that there's just this little balloon in there.
The balloon's a great metaphor for it.
It's so, and it actually kind of makes a human noise.
Well, one slight variation question from my perspective is obviously male voices break, female voices don't break, but there's still, though, I believe, a differentiating factor between their chest voice and their falsetto. Is it just the same thing going on, but it's just a different one?
There's a different thing going on, but I could not tell you. I have no idea. Maybe future Hank can tell us.
Hello, it is Future Hank with an answer to this question. So voices break during puberty because testosterone causes vocal folds to grow really rapidly and unevenly, making it harder to control pitch. So during a testosterone-fueled puberty, the vocal folds will lengthen by about 60%. That's really fast, and it is hard for the mind that is used to controlling those vocal folds to get used to, and that can cause that instability when you're trying to do one thing with a tool that has just changed shape rapidly. Like imagine a hammer that gets like twice as long, you're gonna be bad at using it for a while. Eventually though, the muscles controlling the folds adjust, the brain controlling the muscles adjusts, and people get used to using their new voices. Now, without testosterone going through puberty, your vocal folds still do change and lengthen, but more gradually. Instead of 60%, you'll have like 30%, and those vocal folds stay thinner, so there's not as an abrupt a mismatch between size and control. So that's why voices break a lot during puberty, but of course, the ability ability to have a voice break continues for some people throughout adulthood. So longer, thicker vocal folds are gonna vibrate more slowly, producing deeper sounds, while shorter, thinner vocal folds will vibrate faster, producing higher pitched sounds. So everybody has a chest voice, which is like lower and more powerful, where the whole folds are vibrating, and a head voice where it's just the membrane on top of the folds vibrating. But people with longer vocal folds, they have a more pronounced, noticeable break between those two modes. So I can go like this, like that thing happening. With the shorter folds, that tends to be a more smooth transition between registers because the folds are more flexible and they don't shift between those extremes as much. So you can kind of see how there might be more of a gradient with the shorter folds and more of a sharp break with the thicker ones. This is fascinating to find out. Thank you to Jacob for asking that question. It's not one that I had any idea about before I started researching it as future Hank. Now, back to the episode.
Okay, next question.
Next question.
Okay, cool. Oh, we're starting to run low here. What is the biggest, most unanswerable question in your life right now?
Oh, well, this is kind of a bummer, but it's whether I have cancer or not. Because I finished cancer treatment about a year ago.
Wow.
So I'm in remission. And that's the period of time where there might still be cancer cells in your body just sort of like hanging out, doing their little thing, and they might grow back. And so you don't know or not. I have or had cancer and I just don't know. Isn't that weird?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
And a good,
so I just have to like go
and
live
a good
my
answer.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's like a very specific to me question. I mean, I have lots of other unanswerable questions, but that one's pretty present. You know?
I can imagine.
Yeah, what about you? You might also have cancer, but very low chance.
Yeah, maybe so.
Sorry.
No, I should have thought about an answer to this before,
okay.
but I wasn't expecting to ask me questions. I think in a sense it's like, well, the answer for me personally is different from maybe the answer for all of us collectively. I think collectively, I'm curious what the future of empathy looks like. What does that become in a world where we're very preyed on and our apathy is quite preyed on, and there are increasing materials, dialogues at play which just divide and separate. What's the future of empathy, and how can we fight for it? What does that look like? How do we protect our soft parts?
Yeah, I'm hearing that question maybe in a little bit different way than you mean, because for me, there was so much of our history where our empathy didn't have to extend very far. It was like you had your family. That was like the first circle of empathy. You've got your community, like the people that you see every day. And we, because of the tools we have at our disposal, we are able to have a much broader circle of empathy that even extends beyond humans, that extends to people who don't exist yet. We have to take care of this world for people of the future. And that is just a tremendous amount of pressure, and it feels almost like too much weight to bear when there is disagreement about the right thing to do. And like that disagreement's natural.
And maybe healthy, you could say.
And maybe, yeah. And I have a strong opinion on that. But then there's like what do you actually do when the problems are actually super hard to solve? And I'm having this level of empathy that's almost unheard of in human history. For like such a broad number of people. And so like I'm feeling that so heavily, how can I even get anything done? But then also what I'm hearing from you is like, if that feels like such a weight, aren't there tools, like stories people can tell where you shouldn't care about other people? Or you're right to think that other people are, monstrous, like anywhere from monstrous to ignorant,
Or irrelevant to you, you can say. Yeah. It's a fascinating time. And I think
it is so weird.
I suppose as a person,
it's a very weird
you must feel this too, as someone who has thoughts and has a public voice in the world. It's like, how conscious do you become of ministering to fascinations of others, the needs of others, the interests of others versus your own, which you could kind of transliterate to mean empathy. How far do you extend your vision, your input? How far ranging are your inputs? How consciously do you think about sorting them and organizing them, and what feels important? What feels most important to say? I suppose
I think about it all the time.
I mean, we all do. I think
one of the things that is, people will sometimes say to me, the way that you can have the best impact on the world is to focus on the things that bring you the most joy, that you feel the most comfortable doing, that you're like best at. And I just think that's wrong. I look at where I have the most impact, and it's not where I'm having the least friction. It's where I'm pushing against
such an important
stuff.
thing to say.
It's where I'm collaborating with people who have different interests and have to have all those needs satisfied in a way that is impossible. And so some of them are going to be dissatisfied. But that's where I feel like the actual like most of the work is getting done.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just did the stuff that was most fun, I don't think that the impact would be as great.
For you or others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
It's hard because we're in a society now where there's certainly that train of thought of just like, you follow exactly your fascination, work only for yourself, make things in a vacuum, and everyone wins, you know, and it's not the case, to me.
Yeah. Do you think a lot about, do you make with other people in your mind?
This is such an interesting question. To me, I think, I wouldn't say I make for people, but I like making out of people. Like I like the idea of incorporating the world rather than cutting myself out of it. But I think that it's important for me to do that on my own terms.
Right. You make things out of people.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean, but can you say that?
Well, the whole of this, a system of inputs as a musician comes from the world around you.
Yeah.
Some musical, some non-musical. A lot of it's emotional, a lot of it's about humor, about detail, and you're led to things you're interested in. But that process of taking the world and making it into something.
Do you think about like what's going to work on an audience when you're making? I do.
Yeah, I do. In certain ways, I do definitely.
Because it's almost like you're doing two different things. You're playing the instruments, but you're also playing the person who's consuming the music.
Yes, well, in my case, very literally. Do
you eat people?
I eat people, and I also make them sing first, and then I eat them to make them soft and vulnerable. Then it'd go down easier. But there's something to me really delightful about, say, being on stage, for example, because. And you must feel this with comedy too. It's like if you're on stage and you're talking to an audience and you're only just saying things you're interested in or reeling off the things that you're not connecting. Yeah. And there's an art that every artist will understand about learning where your line is with embracing that beautiful ancient dynamic between the art and the listener. And you become an audience member. You can't switch off from that. So I really enjoy that. But I also feel that obviously if you make things only for other people's delectation, then it's very, very easy to overlook your own taste, which is kind of like your fundamental frequency. It's like that's your ultimate itness is what are you what are you constitutionally, what do you like what do you really like? But I think I really enjoy walking that edging that line, because I think there's beauty on both sides. I mean, I grew up making music in a room in London by myself for the first 20 years of my life before I shared anything, and a lot of that was quite solitary, and I'm very grateful for that. But I was still making things out of the world. I wasn't sitting there generating new things that had never been heard, but I was seeking to combine things in ways that I hadn't necessarily heard combined, which goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier on about creativity is about the combination of things. But that to me feels interesting. And I think the audience is just another one of those things you can incorporate and you can play with them. And there's dialogue there. And a lot of the music I really care about and love the most from history has been somewhat in conversation with the world around it and was not necessarily created on an island. Though some was made on an island. That it can be cool too.
Can come out of nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere. Yeah, everywhere.
I think we should do the last question because I think it is going to mesh well with the conversation we're currently having.
I agree. Yeah.
You know what it is.
I do. I figured out
sneaky.
I figured out the one that I asked that hasn't been.
Yeah.
Okay. So here goes.
Here goes.
Thanks, Puzzle, for all of your assistance today. Can creativity be measured?
We can try.
Yeah. How can we try?
So there's a few different things that we do, like psychology researchers will do to try and create numbers to rank people's creativity. They might sit you down and say, here's a paperclip. Tell me all the uses.
All the uses for. I've seen this before.
And if you can say 10, then you're more creative than someone who said 5. I don't think this is innate. I think that some people in situations where they have more opportunity to do weird things with paperclips, metaphorically.
Paperclip is not an unbiased starting point, is it?
Yeah, and then you can also, there's survey questions you can do. You can do expert analysis. You can give your music to somebody who critiques music and give another piece of music and say which is more creative. And a critic will have an opinion about that.
Yeah.
You can also you take a thing, have ideas about it, but there's also associational creativity, where it's okay, here's things from a category. Can you fit them into a category?
Yeah.
You know the New York Times game Connections?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you played it?
I've done it a little bit. I think I know the one you mean. Well, so that's one particular kind of creativity, isn't it? That's it's
obviously the most subjective thing in the world, right?
So subjective. This is why I asked the question.
Here's what what this made me think about is what are the ingredients to creativity?
Yeah.
Because it's not a thing. It's a bunch of things that all come together.
Like the wind.
Like the wind.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. And you were talking about creativity being like something that is done in concert, and sometimes like with people in the room.
Oh yeah.
But also with people broadly.
Yeah.
So a huge part of creativity is inspiration.
You can say collaboration or combination.
Yeah. It's like knowledge of what has come before. You can't, I don't know, you know music history, but you can't be a person without having the person before.
Yeah.
Can you do one of those? You can't be Bach without...
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, you can't be Bach without Hildegard von Bingen.
Exactly.
She is such a legend. She's such a legend. Do you know about her?
No.
Hildegard,
I'm so glad I asked.
Hildegard von Bingen lived in the 1100s.
Oh.
And she was this maverick kind of monk figure.
Okay.
She kind of like revolutionized, you could say like monody, which is like one melody at one time. Mm-hmm. But she also wrote, she like basically found a bunch of insane principles. She like, if it wasn't for her, none of us would be doing what we're doing. And she was also like a kind of like writer, philosopher. She was just like a very mysterious person.
Nice.
So Bach came, 500 years later and has her to thank for it. She's so awesome.
Did I pick a really early one?
Yeah,
with Bach?
Yeah, Bach's pretty early. Bach's, yeah, you were like, there's no Bach, and I was like, who's before Bach? Hildegard von Bingen. The source, the ultimate source. I'm curious what you feel are the essential building blocks or the foundational categories. I've definitely got my thoughts on this, but I'm curious what you feel like.
I wrote some down.
Yeah, I actually wrote some down as well.
What?
Yeah.
We're cute. I think there is technical skill. So there's time you spent. You can't, like, it would take me a very long time to come up with a riff on the guitar because I'd never learned my scales. You know, like I can just do chords, so I'd have to like pick it out one at a time and then like write the notes down on a piece of paper. So like technical skill, I think, is a huge part of it where you can spend time. Like the amount of time that it takes to actually like be inside of that creative mode is just lower. For me, like with words, much easier. Mm-hmm. You know, lyrics much easier. Writing, especially like a short nonfiction piece, very easy for me because I've written like 1,000.
You've done so many of them before. But so here's one observation that I have that I wonder how you feel about. To me, I think creativity at its essence is very connected to language and how we use language. But the question is, what languages do we gravitate towards and why?
I mean, I gravitate toward the one that I got given.
Yeah.
Do you mean like which, like actual language?
Well, I feel the same way. I agree, and I feel the same way. I feel like music was a language in a sense I was given.
Gotcha.
Because I grew up with music around me. Mm-hmm. But I think to me as a musician, so much of the same things are at play with regard to music and also the learning thereof. So I think about how we learn music a lot of the time because when we learn languages, like how you learn English, was by being surrounded by masters of the language and ultimately given freedom to experiment with things that you were noticing. Oh, there's this, and I'm going to incorporate, you know. And critically, you weren't punished for making mistakes. You know, if you tried to say something and it wasn't right, you probably weren't castigated.
And this is one of my favorite pieces of creativity, which is curiosity.
Yeah.
So like I feel like you can get curiosity knocked out of you.
Yeah.
But to have like a mix of technical skill and curiosity feels like that's like the first two ingredients you need to put into the pot.
The recipe of something. Yeah.
Because you have to want to know what happens if you like take a little bit of jazz and a little bit of funk.
What happens if?
And what happens if?
I mean, the idea of technical skill is also nuanced and interesting because there's kind of consciously acquired or worked or practiced skill. Like you mentioned scales. Like I hated scales as a child.
Yeah.
I resisted learning them until I was about 15 and then I reluctantly obliged him. It actually did help, but there was an amount that I'd learned about scales, like I'd intuitively understood. Okay, so this is a key center. You could say I didn't know it was called a key center, but this feels like, I mean, we're in the key of E flat. This is we're at home. So if I move to other chords, there's still a gravity. When I go there, that feels like, oh, we're back. Whereas if I go kind of like, that's like, oh, we're different. But this is where we live. So there's an idea of kind of like, you could say gravity that I understand, but I don't know if I call that technical skill because I didn't learn it with the part of my brain necessarily that wanted to understand. In the same way I would say that both of us are really good at English grammar as speakers.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. But that wasn't.
You're not used to thinking of it that way,
Yeah,
but we're amazing at
We're
it.
amazing at it, but not because we sat and practiced it and were whipped if we got it wrong. You know.
Yeah.
So critically, I think that with creativity, one of the easiest ways is to understand it is to define when it does not show up. And to me, I think that creativity doesn't show up when you're afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And this is one of the biggest misunderstandings to me of education.
Yeah, because I think it takes curiosity out of it.
Yeah.
And to me, all of this stuff is about curiosity. Like being a human is about curiosity. It's one of my favorite things about people.
Surely
it's
it's
like, but why?
It's partly why we're here, right?
Yeah.
Is to be so interested in all that.
It's one of the motivations that to me feels really pure.
Yeah.
You know, I have a lot of motivations. Some of them aren't nice.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Some of them are a little less pretty.
Yeah.
But curiosity, just like wanting to know what happens and wanting to make people like connect, wanting to help people. Those are like the two good ones.
Yeah. Well,
that I want to indulge in as much as I can.
Yeah, and you can probably trace those back to selfish origins, but you could also say that inherent to people is that wish to connect.
Yeah.
Which both of us share, I think. I mean, everyone probably to a point understands that.
Yeah.
But I think with creativity, to me it's like the best creatives to me are somewhat good communicators in their way. Not necessarily I can explain myself in words like you can so well, but some people might just know when it's right. I know when it's right. This feels right to me. Or think to combine extraneous forces to create new stuff, like new combinations of things. It's funny, the first thing you said in this whole conversation was that you like being asked questions, which is something that I also like. And I think questions are hugely, it's funny, they're like weirdly underrated. I think we're like in an answers obsessed culture.
Yeah.
Like we're obsessed with answers. But
one of my favorite things is when people ask a question, I'm like, we do not know. That's like, there's an answer to that question and we don't know it.
Yeah,
and like we've been talking about a lot of those today.
Yeah. But I love it. I feel like the best creative people are very content with questions and don't need answers, but they do want questions and they ask questions. And I think good art or good creative work poses more questions than it answers.
It's about questioning. For sure.
Yeah.
There's this like sort of adage in teaching that creativity is intelligence having fun.
Yeah.
And you can't have fun if you're being locked up, you know?
No.
And I think curiosity is a big portion of fun.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think that you could say effective creative people, and effective is a weird word because it implies that some creativity is superior to others and you can somehow improve on it or whatever. And I think you can't natively improve on creativity, but you can make space for it and conditions for it. But I think effective creative people have an amount of comfort with hopping between the different modes. Because there's one mode which is, and John Cleese talks about this really eloquently actually, he's brilliant. So he speaks about like the open mode and the closed mode, where the open mode is about, nothing is wrong. You just go, you try it, you free association. He calls it like loosened assumptions, I think he says, where it's just kind of like, anything can go. And then there's the closed mode, which is about, okay, now we've got this stuff, now let's build a thing. And so nothing can ever really fundamentally necessarily be achieved with only one mode. You can't achieve everything in the closed mode, even though some people would like to think you can. And you also can't necessarily achieve everything in the open mode, and there's no definition or you could almost say skill in how to capture and bottle those things up and then catapult them into the world, or catapult them for yourself into a place where they are stable and hold form. So it's like a mixture of forces, right?
I talk about, and I think about a lot about, this is a thing in songwriting for me, in like fiction writing, in nonfiction, in comedy. I talk about pillars. It always feels the same. Like one of the fun things about my life is I've got to create in so many different formats, but I always feel like I need to have something holding me together. So I talk about, these are like I can't take this away or the whole thing's gonna crash down. I'm gonna leave these. And I'm picking them somewhat at random.
So what are those pillars
But I need to pick them. Oh, it's dependent on the form.
They can change.
Yeah, so it's like, sometimes it's like a line in a song where it's like, I'm building around this.
Yes,
I can't lose
this. Is fixed. Yeah.
And so if a line earlier in the song doesn't work with this, if it like kind of foreshadows it too much, or, it makes that feel less special when you get to it, that one goes away because it has to be in service of one of the pillars.
Yeah.
In storytelling, it's very much, it can be scenes. It's like conversations between people, or like plot twists, moments that happen that you have to like be working toward. And occasionally I'll think I'm headed toward a pillar and I end up not getting there. But usually I have like something holding some space.
Holding you together.
Because otherwise there's too many opportunities. There's too, like in fiction especially, anything can happen.
Yeah. Well, same in music, but fiction is a very literal example of it that I completely understand.
Yeah, and so that that makes a lot of sense to me, John Cleese's conversation there around this.
The open and closed mode,
I sort of have like things I need structure about. And in creation, sometimes those things aren't internal to the work. Sometimes they are limitations that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
the
a
work
budget. Like it's how much money
yeah,
you have.
or
It's
time. Yeah.
like how much time you have. Like an idea isn't good if it's not possible.
An idea isn't good if it's not possible. Really interesting.
When we're talking about ideas that like people, because I've made a lot of businesses over the years, so people are like, well, makes like, how do you come up with good ideas?
Yeah.
And it's like, I limit myself to things that I can do. And as my toolkit has grown, that has made it much more possible for me to see ideas that I wouldn't see before because they're actually things that are possible now that were not possible before.
That's really interesting because I've often thought, in a sense, the opposite. Not the opposite, really, but I feel like with creativity and with some of the most interesting ideas, if you wait for them to be possible, then you could wait forever. And so there's a thing I like to say to people sometimes when they say, what's some advice? And I'll say, don't wait for things to be possible before doing them. You just start doing them and then they become possible as you start doing them.
Or you think you're just doing something and something else becomes possible.
Well, exactly, yeah. I think the critical thing you said is that sometimes you aim for a pillar and you don't necessarily get there, but the job of a pillar is not to be it, is not necessarily to stand, be itself. Sometimes just it's
to be the thing you're looking at.
It's exactly. It's use.
It's like a dream. I feel this way about dreams.
Yeah.
Where like they should be abandoned when they stop being useful. Like, but while they're useful, while they're like a target, is if they're fueling you
Use
to
them, fuel
acquire
them.
new skill, to acquire relationships, to get out into the world, to get out of bed.
Yeah.
All that stuff you got to do.
And then I suppose a question comes back to the possible thing. The question becomes, how would you define possible to you? Like what renders something possible? Is it something? Would you say that's something that you've done before, so you know it's doable, or something that you've seen somebody else do, or something that?
And this is absolutely true. Where like things that used to seem possible to me, now if I was back there, I'd be like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
But I like tried anyway because I didn't know it was impossible.
There's something about that audacity that you've clearly enjoyed and done really successfully, and I've also enjoyed over the years of saying, this is impossible, but I'm going to do it. You know.
Yeah.
And there's something
for me
about
that's become dangerous for me because a lot of what makes something impossible is that I do not physically have the time.
Yeah, time is a weird one.
Yeah. And it used to be that I didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Then like that switch is one that I had to take. You know, if I had the option between the two.
Yeah.
You know, deciding which of the things you want to do when you also want to not be stressed out all the time. You want to spend time with your family. You want to like go on vacation.
The family thing is huge as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the time is such a big one with creativity for me, and working with it and against it.
And also like believing the truth that you can't do what you think you can do in the time you think you can do it, which is the problem I have.
A lesson I'm learning constantly, But also sometimes believing that you can do something that's impossible to do.
Yeah, and then you get yourself in a situation where where like maybe you actually get that thing done and then you realize, okay, I cannot take that risk again.
And I'm also thinking in terms of creativity about less, because the kind of business building around creative ideas is one part, which is, I think, so interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what John Cleese is talking about a lot of the time. It's like, how do you run businesses where the open and closed mode are both welcome? But there's a different kind of creativity, say, for example, when you're on stage, and I do a lot of improvisation on stage. And so that becomes less about, less about like what's the objective and how effective is this, and more about, is this fun? Is it free? Is it connective? Is it new? And it's that balance between things I know are going to happen and things I know could happen, and things I have no idea what's going to happen. And you probably feel this too. And I'm actually curious how you came up with this concept, because you're the kind of person who actually is really good at being taken by surprise with a question, but you also like to do prep for your questions.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like all of you must have had to figure that out. Like because like some of my favorite parts of this conversation have been when we go slightly off book, but based in an area.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're on stage, it's a similar thing where it's like, I know I've got 2 hours. People are going to, there's the curfew, everyone's going to leave. I've got this amount of time. I've got the songs, I've got to play the songs.
Yeah.
How can I design space for creativity?
And that's like, that's the kind of limitation too, where you're like, I have to build around these 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
If we break that, I'm gonna get fined.
Yeah.
You know, like people are gonna be mad.
Yeah. To me, effective creative people take obstacles and they treat them as opportunities. Right? So it's like, how can we design lives and time and tasks and projects and businesses and education and our kids and all that to operate on those terms and not to be intimidated by things that, for all intents and purposes, seem like bad things. It seems like this is bad. I'm scared of this. Or this person doesn't like. Right. How do we, like? To me, the most effective creative people have some amount of like tenacity
Right.
to shine through that. And
to me, that seems like part of the creative process. It's like, okay, here are my limitations. Here's what I can't push against.
but how do we train that?
You do it. So if it's actually you, how do you train it in yourself? You do it. If you're trying to train it into someone else, I think beyond communication, beyond like saying it, beyond giving examples, like when we were first making the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, we did this adaptation of Pride and Prejudice into video blogs. And I remember having these conversations early on with the producer where we were trying to figure out how we were going to do it. And we were, filming it in LA, and it's basically a TV show.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to give you a number of dollars you can spend per episode, and you're going to tell me that that's not possible. And so I need you to film it in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Like I need you to go, you're not going to have a set. You're not going to have a location. It's about a girl in her bedroom. You can buy some stuff to put on the walls in your bedroom. That makes sense. But we're filming it in bedrooms.
Yeah.
Like that constraint, I think, in part because online video, it's not at that point especially, it wasn't supposed to look nice.
Yeah.
That made it feel like that idea fit into the constraints really well.
It worked for the time.
Yeah, so it was like, how do you do fiction and online video? You have to abide by the same constraints that the genre, the form, the media of online video at that moment had.
Yeah, exactly. I guess all of us are constantly barraged by a culture of things.
Yeah.
And a way things are made.
Yeah.
You strike me as someone who's endlessly inventive, but also very thoughtful about how ideas can come into the world. And I guess I'm curious what you feel the future of ideas sharing looks like.
Ideas sharing?
Just creativity, really. To rephrase slightly, what's a future? What's a horizon for creativity that excites you to imagine?
Well, that's a different question because I don't know how excited I am. Right now, the tools that have been introduced over the last 20 years in terms of distribution of content are extremely powerful and really, I think exciting.
Yeah.
But also upending.
Yeah.
It's allowed people to say kind of whatever.
Yeah.
And so anything that will get you attention will get made. This is kind of a thing I believe about the internet. If it can get an audience, it will get created.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful and horrifying.
Yeah, both.
And then you add into that system, which we haven't gotten used to yet. We haven't created healthy norms around it yet. No. And you add on a new suite of creative tools of artificial intelligence and generative AI. I think the things that get made, I will often be amazed and delighted by them, but I'm also worried about having both of those big disruptions to media where, one, we have these tremendous recommendation algorithms that kind of make it so that anything that can get attention will get made. Two, you have new tools that sort of lower the friction of creation, especially for maybe, I don't want to call it lower quality, but it's more democratized.
Yeah.
But maybe lower quality.
Yeah.
I think that what generative AI makes is always going to be derivative.
Yeah.
And so its creativity is not human-like.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. It doesn't have an innate point of view, is one thing I feel about it.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I think I don't worry for the position of, say, artists, because a point of view is something that's what you want to, as a listener, that's what I feel you invest in, even if it's on a very surface level degree.
Yeah, yeah. And how does an AI invent that? Even if it's not real, how does it tell a story about
a derivative point of view? I mean, many of us have derivatives point of view as people, but there's something to me utterly, I don't know, it makes you suspicious. The thing I feel is helpful is that we are suspicious.
Right.
In good ways,
so
in appropriate
it makes
ways.
it hard for us to believe the point of view, even if it's pretending to one.
And it's so funny how I think what we're realizing is how incredibly attuned we are to whether something is believable.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast people got good at identifying it with their eyes.
People just know it, which is wild to me.
Yeah. Though, I'm about to make a video, it'll be out by the time this comes out, about how it does make it so that some real things look AI or sound AI.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new challenge to overcome.
It's a whole new
challenge. But at the same time,
yeah.
that tropification of stuff happens all the time in creation, where you can't make the same kind of thing that you used to make because it sounds like everything that came before.
Yeah, I mean, something sounding like AI, essentially that translates to mean this sounds like all of human history
up to this point,
put into a bottle by through the lens of a human intention, which is what a lot of music is anyway, or a lot of art is, or a lot of things that are presented. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find excitement, and I'm just it's a bit of a bummer for me because for many years I've been very excited about the opportunities that this change in media has created, but I'm feeling, I mean, it may just be like the season we're in right now, which is election season in the US. And that makes it hard because of the information environment being so messy right now.
But don't you think that, going back to the point of curiosity, don't you think that in a sense, with all of the contrast in the world, that there is something, to me anyway, that is fiercely exaggerated about the purpose of curiosity and cultivating it in people that is only gaining momentum to me? Like more than ever, we know how much we don't want to feel certain things. And we also know the feeling when we connect, the feeling of connecting, to me, it stands out. It's like you've turned up the saturation of your life, which is really terrifying and scary, but also I do feel like it's more valuable than ever to make things with love and care and to put them into the world. And I'm genuinely excited at the human potential for using this power, all this energy, or even though it's moving in really terrifying directions, it is still energy. It's still vitality. And vitality should be celebrated, even if it's confusing.
This is a great point. I mean, like the moment the printing press kind of hit Europe, it wasn't that long.
I remember it.
when you were just a teen. It wasn't it wasn't that long before it really upended everything, and like the Catholic Church kind of lost a lot of power. There was religious struggles. There were wars fought over like who was right about God and who was right about power and control. And they thought they were arguing about God, but really they were arguing about who was in control. And I feel like we're in that moment now where everything's been tossed up into the air, and that's terrifying. And I'm like alive at the terrifying time, and my son is alive at the terrifying time. But then no one thinks books are bad today. No one looks at printing presses and goes, that's so scary, because we developed norms around it. We created in the structure of the world and in our own selves, we got good at not being manipulated as easily in that way.
In some ways we did, and in critical ways we did.
No, I mean, a book can still be a very powerful thing, but we don't tend to think about them as like dangerous objects in the way that they really were.
They really were.
And pamphlets and all the sort of ways that information was being tossed around. And now we feel that way about a lot of creation on the internet. I think that someday they'll look back and they'll say, man, that must have been a tough time, Or they'll mostly forget about the tough times and they'll just say, I'm so glad that like all of these tools are now available. It was a real revolution in expanding people's voices, in giving, in creating all these new ideas, in being a better system for error correction in society and for uncovering and confirming truth.
One thing I think about a lot with regard to AI and just tools in general is, what happens when the spectacular becomes ordinary? And you said about music before. I can't wait to hear what music sounds like when everybody could make it. You said something like that. And it's like, well, what does that look like? What it looks like is it's a mess, but it's also beautiful. And it's like the thing that happens, which I think probably happened in the beginning with the printing press too, though I'm not sure, is all the things that are easy to do with the printing press happen because people are doing them. Oh, I can do this, I can do this, and then that stuff floats to the surface. And I think this is the thing I was talking about with regard to the sort of contrast and the necessity for curiosity being exaggerated or increased. But there's something that happens when everyone can do things that are entertaining, you could say, or stimulating. We're always going to want more. We're always going to want a deeper experience, but we're going to want to be led there fundamentally on some level, whether or not we take responsibility for those parts of ourselves. And so what happens when the spectacular becomes ordinary is that we go through the spectacular to the ordinary again, and that becomes spectacular. And then work is made out of those principles rather than out of these dazzling things. So many things are designed to dazzle these days. Everything's neon and competitive, and And so I feel like there is potentially, and maybe this is the optimistic part of me, but I feel like there is a great opening in the potential for people to not create things like that completely are
not create things like what?
Well, just like music that moves really slowly, or things that are soft and kind and gentle, and things that just aren't trying to compete for your attention, things that are deeply themselves, things that are complicated and not simple, things that aren't caricaturizable, and things that are sort of like so new, like nature, something that's so nuanced that it's like undiminishable by opinion. It's like things that are just, that's just the thing that it is. And to me, so many of the things I love most and that stay with me in my heart and that inspire me are cut from that cloth. Man, this is really itself. And I think that because there's so much derivative stuff going on right now, there's like a room in the house that people are running away from that's actually always going to be there, that we all will need. And I'm just so curious to see who steps in takes up the mantle of like being the heart people, that, you know, because there's a part of that in all of us, and I think it's about tickling the curiosity, and you do this so brilliantly. You know, it's like reminding people in their busy days to be curious, because it's from there that a lot of the most important things in life come. You know, the care and the humor and the attention, and if we are distributors of attention in the world, feels like a worthy thing to do, to move people's attention gently to places where they can be curious again.
That's another piece of creativity, is what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to get people to go? What are you, like, if you have this power, if you're really like a master, like if you're very good at it, you get to start to ask, but what am I going to use that power for?
Yeah.
And without that, you're going to be using that power mostly for like your kind of base level needs, or just like status,
uninvestigated parts of your unconscious. Like this feels right, you know.
For sure.
But it's an exciting question to ask, you know.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, I find AI liberating this way, because it's like, if you could see anything, what would you see?
Yeah.
Or if you could hear anything, what would you hear? I mean, what a big question to ask any person in the world. It's like, and what culture is created when those questions can be immediately answered?
What culture is created?
It's crazy.
When those questions can be immediately answered.
By children, you know.
That is the thing.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. My son being like, can you show me like the coolest Hot Wheel? And then he looks at it and he's like, that's not the coolest Hot Wheel. And I'm like, what is the coolest Hot Wheel?
You show that to me. It's really wild.
Yeah.
It's really wild.
Thank you for giving me a chance to be curious with you today.
I feel the same way. Cool.
If you have questions for me, if you want to be curious, there's comments. And if you see a question down there that you like, you can upvote it. I'll answer a few of them over the next week. All right, sneaky.
Thank you to everybody who helped make this episode. If you've been watching or listening and you have some questions, you can leave them in the comments. If you see questions that you like, you can upvote those. I'll answer a few of them in the next few days. Also, if you want to see more of what we're up to, you can join the Complexly newsletter by visiting complexly.com.